Israel is attacked from the east by a man named Nahash, whose name means serpent. We know who's behind the attacks. We know who is behind the attacks in 1 Samuel chapter 11, Satan himself, the great serpent of old. We know who was behind the attacks from the east yesterday. Satan, that great serpent of old, and his proxies, the Iranian government, haters of Israel. I haven't yet, but let's open in a word of prayer. In 1 Samuel chapter 11, I told you last week that this is really the one bright spot in all of Saul's kingship, which is an astonishing statement because Saul was the king of Israel, as we'll read soon, for 42 years. And in 42 years of an operation as king, God highlights his good kingly events in one chapter. One story, one event, one battle against this Nahash from Ammon from the east. Look what the scripture says in verse 1. Now Nahash, the Ammonite, he came up and he besieged Yabesh Gilad. Remember that name? He besieged Yabesh Gilad, and all the men of Yabesh said to Nahash, make a covenant with us and we will serve you. Now, let me remind you who these people are, this Yabesh Gilad people. They're people of the Transjordan Jews. Now remember, Transjordan simply means across the Jordan, on the other side of the Jordan. Remember, look at the map here. Look at the map that I'm not showing you, and you'll see everything I want you to know. Look at this map. Of course, modern day Israel in this area right here, but right here in the middle, the Jordan River flows from the Sea of Galilee down to the Dead Sea. Remember when Moses was leading this group before Moses went up to Mount Nebo and died, there were three tribes, Gad, Reuben, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, Manasseh. They came to Moses and they said, we see that this land here is profitable for grazing, and we are grazers. We have large flocks. Can we have our inheritance on this side of the Jordan River? Not in the promised land, but on the east in the Transjordan. Moses checked with God, and God said, okay. So you have Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh here on the east side. Now right here along the Jordan River, you have a little city called Yabesh Gilad. I'm going to remind you of the importance of that city in just a minute. Do you remember what happened in this city? Go into your brains. We talked about it just a few months ago, what happened in this city. What's important about the people of Yabesh Gilad and this war. So you see Nahash here, a name which I said means serpent. Nahash is this Ammonite leader. You see the Ammonites over here in the east. By the way, if this were a map of the world, Iran is over here, way over here. So Nahash here is going up against and besieging this city of Yabesh Gilad, and the people, the Jews, these are Jews in Yabesh Gilad, even though they're on the other side of the river, the Jews there plead with this Nahash, let's make a covenant. There's no need for you to kill us. They knew they were outmatched. They knew they would die in this, but they are asking to make a covenant. If you will spare our lives, we will serve you. Hideous. Another couple thoughts about this city, Yabesh Gilad. It's 25 miles south of the Sea of Galilee. Now imagine that, the Sea of Galilee and this city, a distance of about 25 miles, which doesn't get you halfway to Houston. When you look at the map of Israel, you have to remember just how small, how tiny this piece of earth is. So it's about 25 miles south of the Sea of Galilee. Obviously, it's on the other side of the Jordan River. But I want to challenge your memories here, remind you see what you remember about this place. Turn back with me to the book of Judges just for a second. Look at Judges chapter 21. We're doing this because of this reason. In just a moment, King Saul is going to find out that the Ammonites have attacked the city of Yabesh Gilad. And instantly he is enraged. What is this connection that Saul has for the men of Yabesh Gilad, the citizens of this city, Yabesh Gilad? Why is it that of all cities in all the world that God could choose to pick on, that God would allow Satan to pick on this particular city, Yabesh Gilad, would get the king of Israel, Saul, engaged instantly? No diplomacy here. Saul will immediately recognize these people have to be destroyed. The people, the Ammonites, have to be destroyed. They're messing with the wrong people. What is it about this city that draws that ire? We see the plan of God involved in everything. Look at all the space here. Sukkot, all these Yabok River, all these different places, Mount Nebo, Heshbon. They could have gone to any area of the city or any area of the Transjordan, to any other city to attack it, but they don't. They go to this city and lay siege to this city, and God knows it. And look what it says in Judges 21, verse 1. It says, "Now the men of Israel had sworn in Mizpah." We're going back in time a little bit. "The men of Israel had sworn in Mizpah, saying, none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin in marriage." Do you remember that? What happened? What did Benjamin do, the tribe of Benjamin, in the city of Gibeah? What is it that the tribe of Benjamin did that was so horrible that all the other tribes of Israel said, we will never give one of our sons to any of those people. We'll never give our daughters to any of that tribe. We will not intermarry with Benjamin. You remember what they did? Let me show you. Just look on the board here, follow me. Judges 20, verse 4 and 5. "So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered," remember this story? "The Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, I came with my concubine to spend the night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin." Keep listening to the story. The connection will come and you'll say, I get it. "I came with my concubine to spend the night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin, but the men of Gibeah rose up against me, and they surrounded the house at night because of me." These men surrounded the house. They wanted him to come out, the Levite. They wanted to have homosexual relations with this traveling Levite. The Bible is very clear on it. "They intended to kill me," he says. "Instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died." Remember the man that owned the house, and the Levite presented the woman, the concubine, which was not good, and they killed her. The Benjamites killed this concubine in this sexual rage. They raped her to death. There's no other way to put it. In the very next verse, it says this, and remember this event by the time we get to the end of this story in 1 Samuel 11 and see what Saul the Benjamite does. "I took hold of my concubine," this is the Levite, "I took hold of my dead concubine, and I cut her in pieces and sent her throughout the land of Israel's inheritance, for they have committed," this is the tribe of Benjamin, "for they have committed a lewd and disgraceful act in Israel." And after this event, remember, there is war between the 11 tribes of Israel and Benjamin. And they kill every Benjamite alive except for 600 soldiers. 600 soldiers get away, and now you have 600 men who have no wives, and the men of Israel say, what are we going to do? We've almost destroyed Benjamin. We've almost wiped him off the planet. How are we going to make sure that all 12 tribes of Israel continues to live? What are we going to do to get these Benjamite soldiers wives? Remember this story? Look what it says in Judges 21, verse 2. Here's the solution. So the people came to Bethel. This is the tribes of Israel trying to figure out how to solve this problem. The people came to Bethel and they sat there before God until evening, and they lifted up their voices and they wept bitterly. And they said, "Why, O Lord God of Israel, has this come about in Israel, so that one tribe should be missing today in Israel? We have almost annihilated Benjamin." It came about the next day that the people arose early, the Jewish people, and they built an altar there and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. Then the sons of Israel said, "Who is there?" Now here we are going to be introduced to this city, Yabesh Gilad. "Who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up in the assembly to the Lord?" When the sons of Israel, when this Levite sent out these 12 pieces of this human body, they demanded that all of Israel come together to defend against this lewd and disgraceful act of Benjamin. Was there anybody who didn't come when we called muster for the armies of Israel to gather? Were there any people, any men in any city who didn't come to our aid? They had taken a great oath concerning him who did not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, "He shall surely be put to death." Look at verse 6. The sons of Israel were sorry for their brother Benjamin, and they said, "One tribe is cut off from Israel today. What shall we do for wives for those who are left?" These are the 600 men. "Since we have sworn by Yahweh not to give them any of our daughters in marriage." What are we going to do for wives? We've sworn, everybody has taken an oath that none of our women will be given to these men. Where are we going to get Jewish women for these Jewish men? They've put themselves in a pickle. We talked about this. Verse 8, they asked the question again. "What one is there of the tribes of Israel who did not come up to Yahweh at Mizpah? And behold, no one had come to the camp from Yabesh Gilad." There's our city. The men of Yabesh Gilad ignored the call to muster the army. They did not go. No one had come from the tribes or from the camp of Yabesh Gilad to the assembly. For when the people were numbered, behold, not one of the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilad was there. The congregation, the men of Israel, the 11 tribes, sent 12,000 of the valiant warriors there and commanded them, and they said, "Go and strike the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilad with the edge of the sword, with the women and the little ones. This is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every man and every woman who has lain with a man." So who are the ones that are going to be saved? Only the virgins. Only young virgin girls in Yabesh Gilad. Everything else, everyone else is going to be killed. In verse 12 it says, "They found among the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilad 400 young virgins who had not known a man by lying with him, by having sexual intercourse with him. And they brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan." So they brought them across the river. They presented these 400 young virgins to what tribe? The tribe of Benjamin. Hold on to that thought. Then the whole congregation sent word and spoke to the sons of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon and proclaimed peace to them. Benjamin returned, the 600 men with their 400 women. Benjamin returned at that time, and they gave them the women who they had kept alive from the women of Yabesh Gilad, yet they were not enough for them. There were 200 women yet needed for the 600 soldiers, but that's a different part of the story. My question is, what tribe is Saul from? He's a Benjamite. So when you think of this, look at this 1 Samuel 9 verse 16 just to prove. I don't like to make statements without a Bible verse to prove it. About this time tomorrow I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. This is Saul the Benjamite from the 12th tribe of Israel, the youngest son Benjamin. And you shall anoint him. This is God speaking to Samuel. You shall anoint him to be prince over my people Israel. And he will deliver my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I have regarded my people because their cry has come to me. So of all the cities to pick on, for a Benjamite man whose mother may have been from Yabesh Gilad, are you picking this up yet? His heritage. He had a biological maternal connection to the city of Yabesh Gilad. Everybody else was killed. There were 600 soldiers that needed wives, and 400 of those wives came from this city, Yabesh Gilad. Of all the cities to pick on, this is the wrong one. You can't pick on this city in the eyes of a Benjamite because our mothers came from there. Are you getting that? Our mothers came from there. This is the city of our maternal heritage. Wrong city to pick on. Immediately got Saul's ire. So in verse 2 then, back in 1 Samuel chapter 11, the men, the Jews in Yabesh Gilad are saying, Nahash, make a covenant with us and we will serve you as servants. But Nahash the Ammonite said to them, I will make it with you on this condition, that I will gouge out the right eye of every one of you. Thus I will make it a reproach on all Israel. This gouging out the right eye idea would make these Jewish men unable to wage war. I mean, imagine we're talking about warfare with bows and arrows in these days. The majority of humans on earth are right-handed, right-eyed, right eye dominant. You can't pull an arrow and aim if you don't have a right eye. It takes the capacity for warfare away from the city of Yabesh Gilad. So also imagine holding up a shield while you're fighting with the sword, the shield which covers the left side of your face, only your right side is still exposed so you can see to fight with your right eye, not if they gouge it out. This is a destruction of the army of Yabesh Gilad. They want to take it over. They don't want Yabesh Gilad and its men to ever revolt. So we're going to make you non-soldiers by plucking out your right eyes. The elders of Yabesh said to him, imagine this event. Imagine men, somebody saying, we will live in peace with you, just let us gouge out your right eye, and all of us saying, okay, that sounds fair. Imagine saying okay to an event like this. The elders of Yabesh, the Jews, said to him, let us alone for 7 days. Now this is an interesting thing. Look at this. Let us alone for 7 days, that we may send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. Then, if there is no one to deliver us, we will come out to you, meaning we will allow you to gouge out our right eyes. The crazy thing about it is the king of Ammon, Nahash, gave them the 7 days. What did he think about Israel? Not much. He clearly didn't think Israel was a force to be reckoned with. He allowed them the 7 days. Sure, go into the land of Israel and see who you can gather. You people are unorganized. You've got no central government. You've got no central army. I'll give you all the time you need, and then I'll come in and I'll conquer your land. Total arrogance on the part of this serpent, this Nahash. He gave them the time. He thought there was no way Israel could mount a response. And so he gave them the week. In verse 4, the messengers went out. Then the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul. Now this is interesting. You recognize that name of that town, Gibeah? What's the story we just read? Of a Levite and a concubine coming into the city of Gibeah, trying to spend the night there so they could continue on their way. And it's in this city that the men were so crooked and pathetic that they tried to do to the Levite what they tried to do, and they were given the concubine and raped her to death. This is Saul's hometown. These are Saul's people. There's so many connections if you just let the Bible story unfold. So Saul of Gibeah of Saul, is where the messengers came to, and they spoke these words that the eyes would be gouged out in 7 days if they couldn't mount a response. They spoke these words in the hearing of the people, and all the people lifted up their voices and wept. They were afraid for their countrymen. They didn't like. This is a very sad story, an event that would happen, and they wept. But what about Yahweh? Speaking of what's going on in Israel today, I prayed and mentioned this verse in my prayer. In Genesis 12, verse 3, God says very clearly to the Jewish people, I'll bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. What about that promise? Why are these people falling down weeping, thinking only of their inabilities instead of girding themselves for war, thinking of what God can do and what God has already promised? Nahash the Ammonite is cursing Israel, and they're cursing the God of Israel. You take your 7 days and gather anybody you can gather. You cannot defeat me. We may not be able to, but we walk behind a God who could topple you instantly. Should have been the response of Israel. But instead, in Gibeah of Saul, people hear that God's people are being cursed, and they cower in fear and can do nothing but weep. Verse 5 says, Now behold, Saul, the king, newly appointed king, was coming from the field behind the oxen. He was plowing that day. He is the king of Israel. And he was walking behind oxen plowing a field. Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen, and he said, What is the matter with the people that they weep? And so they related to him the words of the men of Yabesh. And verse 6 says, we'll get back to verse 5 in just a moment. Let's read verse 6. Then the Spirit of God, God the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Godhead, then the Spirit of God came upon Saul mightily when he heard these words, and he became very angry. These are my maternal, biological heritage people. Yabesh Gilad, not on my watch. I'll defend her to the death. Of all cities that Satan could have picked on, it seems as if God lured him in to the city of Yabesh Gilad, because he knew that Saul would not have to be talked into it. He would instantly want to defeat these people in battle, kill them all. That's what we see here. It's personal to Saul. It's personal. These are his people. His maternal stock came from these people, from the people, the virgins, the 400 virgins from Yabesh Gilad. But what about Saul? Let's just ask this question. We see him plowing his field behind oxen. Unusual. It's unusual, number one, for the owner of a field to plow it. He's got servants for that. What in the world is Saul doing plowing a field as the king, the anointed king of Israel? I'm going to let you answer that question like I did last time, because it really doesn't matter, but it's interesting that the Lord put that fact in here. That Saul, at least a couple of observations, a couple of choices, just showed Saul's humility. A lot of people think it simply showed Saul's humility. This is a hard-working man, not afraid to get his hands dirty. And even though he's the king of Israel, if he wants to plow, he's going to go out there and plow. Maybe beside his father, remember his father was wealthy, influential in the town of Gibeah. Maybe even beside his father's servants, you've got the king of Israel pushing plow. An astounding event. Maybe he simply hadn't received any instruction from Yahweh, from God through Samuel, about what to do, how to set up his kingship. Maybe he was just in a waiting game, and this event with Yabesh Gilad is how God spurred him to action and made the kingship of Saul start moving quickly. I'm right there. I think this is simply God spurring Saul on to action. I don't know why he was in the field. It doesn't matter. Hardworking guy, humble man, I'll give him that. We've seen that before. Look what it says. After the Spirit of God comes mightily upon Saul and he gets very angry. Look what he did. Remember what the 11 tribes did? The Levite cut the concubine into 12 pieces? An unthinkable thing. But look what Saul does. I wonder if he knew that other story. I wonder if he was leaning on that muster of the Israeli army before when he did this. He took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout the territory of Israel by the hand of messengers. Exact same event. Only this time it's 2 oxen instead of this dead concubine woman. And what did he say? The same thing. Whoever does not come out after Saul and after Samuel, if you won't answer the call to muster, you Israeli men of war, if you won't answer the call, so shall it be done to his oxen. I'll go and destroy your livelihood. I'll cut up all your oxen. Then the dread of Yahweh fell on the people, and they came out as one man. Saul exerts himself as the king of Israel in his first and maybe one of his last strong events here. Saul musters his army. The dread of the Lord fell upon the people, it says, and the dread of the Lord when they see the piece of oxen come into their tribal territory, the dread of the Lord fell on the people. I'm going to use this quote. Kyle and Delitzsch, 2 writers back 100 years ago, wrote a commentary on the Old Testament, and this is what they said concerning this statement: the dread of the Lord fell on the people. They say in Saul's energetic appeal, can you imagine the energy with which you would receive that appeal from Saul? You show up to fight or I'll destroy you. In Saul's energetic appeal, the people discerned the power of Jehovah, who I would call Yahweh, which inspired them with fear and impelled them to immediate obedience. They heard in the voice of Saul, in the actions of Saul, they heard the hand of God moving. We have to muster our army. We have to deliver our people, Yabesh Gilad, from the hand of this evil serpent. We will go to war. Isn't it amazing? We're talking about these things on this day when what happened last night. God does these things. Verse 8, he numbered them in Bezek, which is just across about 16 miles due west of Yabesh Gilad on the west side of the Jordan River. This is where he gathers the army. He numbered them in Bezek, and the sons of Israel were 300,000. The men of Judah were 30,000. They said to the messengers who had come, "Thus you shall say to the men of Yabesh Gilad." Remember, Yabesh Gilad sent messengers? Now we're going to send a message back to the city. And what did they say? Tomorrow, the tribes of Israel gathered an army, and they sent this message back. Tomorrow, by the time the sun is hot, by noon, you will have deliverance. Israel is going to war. So the messengers went and told the men of Yabesh, and they were glad. Then the men of Yabesh said, tomorrow, they're talking to the king, the bad guy, Nahash, the serpent from Ammon again. The men of Yabesh said, tomorrow we will come out to you, and you may do to us whatever seems good to you. There's a little bit of sarcasm in his voice when he says this. He knows the Israeli army is gathered and ready for war. What he says literally, it's not whatever seems good to you, whatever is right in your eyes. That's what he says to Nahash. You can do to us whatever is right in your eyes. I will gouge out your right eye, and you can do to us tomorrow whatever is right in your eyes. You have not seen Israel roll in battle yet. You will by tomorrow. The next morning, Saul put the people in 3 companies. They came into the midst of the camp at the morning watch between 2 and 6 a.m. This is a night raid. And they struck down the Ammonites until the heat of the day. Those who survived of the Ammonites were scattered so that no two of them were left together. This exactly is my prayer for those that hate Israel today, those that launch those missiles. I would pray to God, and I have, that those who survive this won't have another man standing beside him. But what happens in this event here is that Israel defeats the Ammonites under the leadership of King Saul. He has cemented God through this event of allowing Satan, the serpent Nahash of Ammon, to pick on Yabesh Gilad. He has fired up Saul, who would go to his mother's hometown and defend it with his life. And he has cemented now under Saul the support of all of Israel. So the threat of war from the serpent Nahash was used by God to cement support under the first king of Israel, Saul. This is an interesting verse. Look what it says in the next chapter. We'll get to this next week. But look what it says. Remember, God wasn't happy with Israel. God said, Samuel, they are not rejecting you. They are rejecting me as being king. And you wonder, was there an event that made Israel wake up one day and say, we want a king? What happened in Israel that caused them to say, we need a human king to lead us into battle? The Bible tells us that it was this event. That it was this event that caused Israel to rise up and say, we need a king. Look what it says in 1 Samuel 12:12. This is Samuel talking to Israel. He says, when you saw that Nahash, the king of the sons of Ammon, came against you, you, Israel, came to me, Samuel, and this is what you said, no, but a king shall reign over us, although Yahweh your God was your king. So here we have that Yahweh is the king of Israel. He would raise up judges as needed, but he was the supreme. He was the leader. He was their king. Israel rejected that, but in this verse we see that it was because of this event. When they heard that Nahash had come up against them, they demanded a king. Interesting little bit of info there. Verse 12 back in 1 Samuel 11 says, then the people said to Samuel, look what the people want to do. Remember when Samuel was anointed, there was a group of worthless men, it said, who would not give kingship to Saul. They were acting like, who is this guy? Who is this guy and why should we follow him? And now that Israel is behind Saul and his ability to reign over them, they want to go and find those men who wouldn't bow to Saul and kill them. That's what this is about. Those worthless men, we need to round them up because Saul has proven himself king of Israel. And if you won't bow to Saul, today you die. So now Jews are turning on Jews in this event. The people said to Samuel, who is he that said, shall Saul reign over us? These are the ambivalent ones saying, this guy's not worthy to reign over us. Who's this clown? And the people of Israel now, because Saul wouldn't do anything about it, the people of Israel were saying, bring the men that we may put them to death. Remember, here's the verse from last week. But certain worthless men said, how can this one deliver us? And they despised Saul and did not bring him any present, but Saul kept silent. Maybe I think it was a great diplomatic act. Well, I start a fight with people you don't need to start a fight with. Saul kept silent. But now the men of Israel are saying, bring those certain worthless men out. We want to kill them. Saul is our king. Verse 13, but Saul said, not a man shall be put to death this day. Saul wouldn't allow it. For today Yahweh, the Lord, has accomplished deliverance in Israel. I pray that he's working right now to accomplish deliverance in Israel today. It's an interesting statement out of Saul's mouth. This is the first time recorded that Saul mentions Yahweh. I've told you over and over in this introduction to Saul in these couple of chapters in Samuel that Saul doesn't have this great abiding relationship with the Lord. Finally, Saul mentions the Lord's name here, by name Yahweh. He gives credit to the battle to Yahweh. Today the Lord has accomplished deliverance in Israel. Praise God for that. This is a high point in Saul's reign. Samuel in verse 14 said to the people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there." So all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal. There they also offered sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord. And there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. It's exactly what Israel wanted, a king to lead them in battle. And on this day, God gave them a king that led them successfully in battle. At the end of the battle, he gave credit to the Lord. This was a good day in the life of King Saul. There's another story that takes us to the end of this chapter, but there's another story. There's another ending to this story, an alternate ending in the movie. I want to share it with you. Saul, I love things like this in this book. The camaraderie of men, the fellowship of men. Saul came to the aid of his people from Yabesh Gilad without question. Later in the story, when Saul is finally killed, the men of Yabesh Gilad come to his aid without question. Without hesitation, we are brothers in arms, Saul to the death. Look at what it says in 1 Samuel chapter 31, 6 and 7. About 5 verses here and we'll close. Saul is in battle with the Philistines. Saul has had good days long in his past, and now Saul has had bad days. He's gone to the witch of Endor, a city. He's found a diviner. He's found this witch. And he's asked this witch to bring Samuel up from the dead because Yahweh is no longer talking to Saul. The Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, the Scripture says. So Saul speaks to Samuel, and Samuel says, God will give Israel over to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your son Samuel will be with me tomorrow. You will die. And in verse 6 of chapter 31, thus Saul died. With his 3 sons, with his armor bearer, and all his men on that day together. When the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley, with those who were beyond the Jordan, saw that the men of Israel had fled, and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities and they fled. You cut the head off the king, everybody panics. And so the armies of Israel fled on this day. They abandoned the cities they were defending and they fled, and the Philistines came and lived in them. The next couple of verses, it came about on the next day, when things have settled down and they're not at battle, not at war, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, because you know that's what you do in warfare. You've got all these men that are on the field. You come, you get their spears, their swords, you strip their ring. Anything they have of value, you take. That's what's happening here. The Philistines have come to strip the Jewish men who have fallen in battle. That they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They cut off his head, and they stripped off his weapons, and they sent them throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of their idols, their false gods, and to the people. Who in Israel will be enraged that Saul has been treated like this? What's the answer? The men of Yabesh Gilad. They put his weapons in the temple of Ashtaroth. They fastened his body to the wall of Beit Shan. I've been in this city, Beit Shan. A body without a head. They fastened Saul's body to the wall. And it says in 1 Samuel 31 verse 11, now when the inhabitants of Yabesh Gilad heard what the Philistines had done to their son Saul, all the valiant men rose. They walked all night, and they took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Beit Shan, and they came to Yabesh, and they burned them there. They took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree at Yabesh, and they fasted for 7 days. Yabesh Gilad on the right side, the east side of the Jordan River. Beit Shan, 15 miles or so on the other side of the river. When the men of Yabesh Gilad hear that Saul has been nailed to the wall, they don't think twice about it. They don't fear for their lives. Israel has just been defeated by the Philistines in battle. They are a superior force, but the men of Yabesh Gilad don't care a thing about that. They go in there at risk of their own lives to take their son Saul off the wall. I love things like that in this book. He protected them. They protected him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. May the United States of America stand with Israel to the death. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. Let's close in prayer.